This is the Sales Babble Podcast, episode 526, How to Erase Your Fear of Cold Calling.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
The other day I was noodling on this and I was thinking about how people get jittery when it comes to cold calling. It's almost like they'd rather face a dentist drill than pick up the phone. I had a friend of mine who once told me, never did vacuuming look so good as when it was time to make a cold call. Do you feel that way? But this is the thing. Here's the kicker. Doing nothing just makes the jitters worse. And on the flip side, taking action, well, that's where the magic happens. In today's episode, we'll be diving into the psychology of our phone phobias and embrace the wu-wei approach that Lao Tse wrote about in the Tao Te Ching all the time, wu-wei being frictionless action. So instead of dodging the discomfort, let's lean into it and see it for what it really is. Because this is the bottom line. It's not as scary as it seems. After listening to today's episode, I'm hoping that next time when you hesitate to make that call, you'll remember that acceptance is your secret weapon to conquer cold calling fear. But before we start, make sure and subscribe to the podcast on whatever app that you're listening to. You can also follow us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and myself on LinkedIn. And you can find links to all these in the show notes. And so with no further ado, let's babble. And now today's chapter. The journey of a closed deal begins with a single cold call. While some fear, others embrace it, knowing that while those who can manage others are powerful, those who manage their fears are mightier still. The master seller anticipates a difficult sale by managing expectations. Separating the wheat from the chaff, they use a numbers game to create opportunities. And now today's story. Chris had wanted to get into sales for quite some time and transferred excitedly into an SDR role. But the job wasn't what Chris thought it would be. Each calling session was a hamster wheel of rude responses, hang-ups, and rejection. And soon Chris's pace slowed, and Pat noticed it. "What's going on?" asked Pat. "You were so excited when you started." "I know," responded Chris. "I guess I'm not cut out for cold calling. Everybody I call hates me." Pat laughed. "That's not true. The trick is to remember it's just business. Not everyone we call is qualified, and if they are, they're not ready to buy. Often the timing isn't good, or they have more pressing matters at hand. This is the thing. Only 1 out of 20 calls are going to be prospects somewhat interested in what we provide. Let's find success in that percentage rate. If we just do our job, it'll all work out. Eventually you'll meet people we can help. I think it's just a matter of patience. And don't forget, you have the most important role in the company." "Well, what do you mean by that?" said Chris. "The most important role?" Pat responded. "This entire company would grind to a halt if we stopped closing sales. It's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. I know, but I am certain you can do it." That afternoon, Pat cleared the schedule, and for the rest of the day, they worked on how to erase Chris's fear of cold calling. Now, guys, this is the thing. Selling isn't something to be feared, but to be understood. When a seller conquers fear, they learn a broader secret about life. Each of us must confront our fears, facing them head on. And how we handle that fear determines how we spend our lives. Do we live a life filled with regret, or do we experience the joy of adventure? Lao Tzu wrote, "Act without doing, work without effort. Think of the small as large and the few as many. Confront the difficult while it is still easy. Accomplish the great task by a series of small acts." End quote. You know, as they say, you eat an elephant a bite at a time. You don't eat it all at once. The same is true in selling. You just need some momentum. And how do you build momentum? You start with a simple phone call. Now, did you find value in this week's episode? Would you like to see it all typed out? Well, I've got it. It's in this week's chapter of the Tao of Sales Babble in the show notes. And you can find those at salesbabble.com. While you're on the website, you can sign up for our brief weekly newsletter, and we'll send you links every Tuesday. So it's easy peasy for you to click on and listen. Or you can always subscribe on whatever podcast app that you're listening to right now. Now, I want to go back to the question I asked you a bit ago. If you found value in this episode, if you could do me a favor and share this episode with a friend who's also interested in growing their selling skills, please do that. I would really appreciate if you did that, because word of mouth is the way to grow a podcast, and it's a way of growing this sales community. Now, lastly, if you've got any questions about selling, please reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn or click the Babble Me link on the website. That'll send a message directly to my inbox. I love to talk about sales. It's one of my favorite topics, as you can guess. With that said, that's all I've got for today. Until next Tuesday, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.